Hello, sir. How are you?
Hey, I'm awesome. How about yourself?
I am doing fantastic and I'm just thrilled to talk to you about this movie. Candyman is one of my all-time favorites for a lot of reasons, but this is like super exciting and thank you for taking the time.
Oh, that's amazing. I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad to be speaking with you today.
Well, thank you so much, sir. So, first question, had you seen the original film previously before being cast, and what was your first experience with it like? Like what did you know and how did it affect you?
Yeah, I did see it. I saw it when I was very, very young, and I mean, just as everybody else, it was terrifying. I remember um, thinking about playing the games in the bathroom. You know, going in the bathroom and getting in the mirror and thinking about playing the game. And I remember being dared to play the game. Um, but I don't remember ever having the courage to actually do it. You know, I remember, you know, for me, I didn't even recall the plot of the movie. I was one of those, I'm one of those people who, for who the iconography of Candyman and the idea of Candyman was the most lasting thing. I might have saw it when I was 5 years old or 6 years old, but from that time, just the idea of this hook hand man with bees coming out of his mouth, coming to get me, that was hauntingly terrifying, and that was really my relationship to the movie, up until the point where I had the opportunity to play the role, and then I went back and I watched the Candyman trilogy actually.
Well, and the other question to this, kind of piggybacking on that, was this appears to be like it's a sequel, but it's what can you tell us about your character and the story without giving too much away? Because I know you probably can't. But
Sure. Well, yeah. Well, I'm glad you did put it that way because it's not a reboot.
mhm.
You know what I mean? It's not a reboot or necessarily a remake. We're honoring a lot of the legacy of the original Candyman. And I play a character in present day Cabrini, or in present day Chicago, I should say. His name is Anthony. He's a painter. He's an artist on the brink of a stalling career. You know, and and he stumbles back to Cabrini, looking for artistic inspiration, and I guess that artistic inspiration opens up a door. I should say that he wished he would not have opened. But he's an artist, and he's a guy who's from Chicago, and he's searching for inspiration. That inspiration leads him to some very scary incidences.
So, and like I said, it's a return to the world of Candyman, but not quite it's not quite
Uh-huh.
a sequel. But this time
Uh-huh.
around, because one thing I really, really loved about the original film was it spoke to the environment of the people that were living in Cabrini Green at that time, and spoke to the plight of those people, and utilized the setting. And now you've got Cabrini Green where, from what I've seen and read, it's now you've got this whole. It's been torn down. It's being gentrified, and this one is going to speak to living in society today with this gentrification and kind of like
Mhm.
the loss of identity for a lot of people. How
Mhm.
can you talk about utilizing the story to speak to that? Because it was so relevant and well, like it just, I loved how the story sculpted itself around that.
Yeah, well, those themes are definitely present today. I mean, unfortunately, uh, um, the story who about outsiders versus insiders, about who gets to tell the story of who gets to control the narrative of what goes on in that place, and what are the consequences when new faces come in and begin to control the narrative or begin to tell the story of what goes on, in that neighborhood. So it is a story about, I guess, what happens when others when outsiders come in and begin to haunt, so to speak, to begin to possess and to haunt haunt our places, or haunt places that are not their own. It's definitely one that's going to pick up on those themes of gentrification and of pushing out pushing out people who are native to those communities. And what happens as a result? What are the consequences? It's a story about identity in that regard as well, and how that can be a very violent, traumatizing process.
Gotcha. Well, and one thing that I noticed and is, your character Anthony is an artist, and Daniel Roberdeau, who, the character of Candyman, was an artist as well.
Mm-hmm.
Is that going to be something that is a nice, like a parallel there? Is that going to fit into the narrative that you both are artists? Because I'm guessing it probably will.
Well, I think Jordan is, Jordan and the writers are very intentional. I should say about what they put into the story. I don't think that it's a coincidence. I would say that I don't think that it's merely a coincidence that Anthony is a painter. So I think that there are definitely narrative opportunities, to tie in, and I think that's about as much as I can say about that.
Well done, sir. Well done. Good answer. So kind of hopping off of that train of thought, can you talk about working with the original cast? Because I know Tony came back and I know Virginia came back. How was it what was it like working with Tony Todd on this after having been terrified by him as a kid?
I actually did not get a chance to.
Oh no.
I actually didn't get a chance to meet Tony, but I did. I saw his performance, and his portrayal was masterful. And I wanted to make sure that I gave that I watched that to make sure to honor that. But I wasn't in a position to meet Tony this time around. But we definitely, I definitely did appreciate everything that he did bring to the table for this one, and likewise for Virginia as well.
Awesome. So what was it like working with Nia DeCosta on this? Because she seems to be like a really great director on the rise here, and it's a neat. I love the fact that she's an African American woman who is directing this film,
Mm-hmm.
because it's such a neat story, and I love to see a woman's take on this, and I think this is going to be a fantastic way of doing it. What was it like working on the set?
Yeah, well, Nia's so smart. She's so smart. I saw one, I sat down just to meet with her, and I just loved her vision for it, and her as I could tell right off the back that she loved movies, and she loved being a filmmaker, and she loved telling stories, and she's a very visual person, very, very, very intelligent, and she knows her film history. And then I got a chance to go and see, before we start filming, I went to go and see Little Woods, which was, I believe, her feature debut, and just the way that she builds, and I really got a sense for the way that she builds story and relationships with characters, but also the way that she builds suspense, in her films, or in that film specifically. I said, oh wow, I really want to work with her. I'm really excited about getting there, and I wasn't disappointed. She shares the space. She has a very clear, precise vision, and she was a lot of fun to work with. I think she kept the it wasn't a high pressure set. The morale was always high, and she shared the artistic space, and guided us when we had questions, and when they were, might have been blind spots and things like that. I think she did a really good job of keeping us on task. She was really excellent to be able to lean on throughout the making of this.
Fantastic. So you've worked with Jordan previously, and he's really leading the just the the parade for African American creators in horror and genre in particular, just every genre really. But it's, you know, there's always been a really big love in the horror community from the from Black audiences, which hasn't really been seen until really recently, and with Candyman kind of like brought that back and really into the public eye. Can you talk about you know, it's been in the movie lexicon for a while with like Dwayne Jones and Night of the Living Dead, William Marshall in particular, who I love, and even, you know, Mark Bay, who in Sugar Hill. How is it for you to be a part of this in this new renaissance that's really bringing it into the public eye? Because it's always been there, but you know, I think it's fantastic that it's really coming, you know, being shown again, like in such a great way with Jordan.
Yeah, I mean, it's honestly just listening to you, you know, list off those movies and just bring up the topic. It's an education for me as well. You know, I would say that I was not a fan of. Well, I wasn't against horror movies. You know, I don't want to make it seem like I was not a fan of horror movies, but I wasn't. You know, horror movies were not at the top of my list. You know, and I mean, I knew about Candyman, but that was. You know, my relationship to that was way back when, and the iconography of it, and you know, the story was still strong, but I hadn't seen anything else like that. And when Jordan sort of invited, you know, I felt like Jordan created a space that invited me back to the theater to appreciate the genre. You know, he sort of created a space that where I felt represented, where I felt seen. And now we're telling these stories, and we're telling these, you know, these horror stories and genres, and some of them are socially conscious, some of them have you know, have important messages, others are just straight up horror stories. So, you know, I think he you know, really did a great job of putting creating a space that was welcoming, you know, for African American viewers. But then also just to putting new energy and new blood into the genre, into the atmosphere. So now we're going and we're buying tickets, and we're selling. You know, we're selling out movie theaters, buying out movie theaters, and sitting down, putting our pen to the pad, and writing those stories. It's really awesome to be a part of that invigorating energy, and you know, to be a part of this movement right now.
Well, and that kind of feeds into another question I had for you, is what, with your work in Watchmen and Us, and with this film as well, you know, using sci-fi and horror to speak about subjects like racism and civil rights. Have you got, it sounds like you've really become, you know, appreciative of the use of genre as a tool in speaking to these things that normally, and I've brought this up in previous interviews with others, especially recently, because it's really becoming a thing that I really enjoy. And Jordan took this from the Twilight Zone too, you know, which really started it, is speaking of these things without people realizing you're speaking to them, and then they learn something from it, and it starts a dialogue. Can you talk about being a part of that and seeing that really come into play recently as a way of kind of like starting that dialogue?
Yeah, well, you know, to me, it's about adventure. It's about creativity and storytelling. You know, I think we have several opportunities. You know, there's no shortage of you know, straight, so to speak, traditional narratives, or you know, traditional or straight narratives that tell these stories, that kind of set it up as, you know, problem and solution, or action reaction, you know, or sort of a, you know, a straight narrative that lays out the issues that we're going to talk about. But I think now, you know, we're in a space now where we get to, or where we're more comfortable with it, with exercising other types of possibilities, you know, where it's not simply, where we simply don't have to tell stories of oppression, but we can tell stories about power, and stories about magic, and stories about goblins and creatures, while also inflicting another narrative, while also, you know, having subliminal points and subplots that speak to things that are just as important, you know. And me, that means that we're entering into a place of more artistic freedom and expression. You know, sometimes it takes telling the narrative in a more traditional way, over and over and over and over, in order to realize that, well, now we can turn this story upside down, or now we can hide this story in an adventure story, or we can hide this story in a magical realm, and the story can still exist. The story can still be powerful. And I think in these scenarios, we often are more powerful than the oppression that is on us. You know, because we get to walk on the earth as gods, or we can, you know, walk on the earth in some type of mystical immortality. You know, and so we're not always the receivers of the oppression. You know, but we can also play different positions within the narrative and still have those stories being told. So I think that the genre has definitely opened up those doors, you know, to be able to you know, to tell those stories in a different way and from a more powerful point of view. And I'm very, very honored to be a part of those, you know, to be a part of this movement.
That's fantastic. So,
we have time for one more question.
Perfect. I have one question left, and it kind of feeds it kind of feeds into what you just said, which is the one thing that I always really, really love specifically about Candyman and how the character and the story worked was the power of myth and story in particular, and how what kept him going and kept him alive, and the whole point of it was really the power of keeping this story going kept him powered, basically.
Yes.
Can you, as a storyteller and an actor in particular, can you talk about your takeaway from that and how these stories keep going? It's like the same with, you know, I see Candyman taking his place alongside characters like Dracula and Frankenstein that just keep going. We keep them alive with the power of our stories. Can you talk to that?
Yeah, well, yeah, sure. I think, I think you really, in asking the question, you know, you hit the nail on the head. You know, Candyman, you know, there's what we're doing with Candyman. Well, one, let's just speak to two things. Let's just speak to just the story of Candyman and the myth of Candyman. It lives because of the gruesome nature of his violence, you know, of his actions, and the retelling of that. But even in order to summon him, you know, we're asked to summon him. His name is alive, God, because we're asked to repeat his name over and over and over and over. And that becomes a part of the experience. That becomes a part of the myth. And his name lives on, which allows him to still be present on earth. You know, and I think what's awesome about our story that we're telling is that, you know, there's also parallels to young men who were young men and women who were, you know, taken too soon, or who were casualties of the movement. You know, casualties of systematic, you know, racist oppression, you know, in this country. And we say their names. You know, we say Mike Brown's name. You know, we say Sandra Bland's name. You know, and we say their names as a way to keep them alive, to keep their stories alive. So I think this is, and even, you know, the original Candyman was a man who was, in the original story, a man who was murdered in a very in a very gruesome way by a white oppressive force, and his name, so to speak, was kept alive. So, you know, I think it's also a nod to our responsibility to keep alive the names of those who were sacrificed, you know, who were sacrificed in our on this journey to, you know, along the journey to, you know, to pursue this freedom that we're constantly after, you know. And so I think that's a very powerful part of the story that we're telling as well.
That is a fantastic answer. Thank you so much. It was beautiful.
So thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you for your question.